an opportunity to come in. We start at 7 o'clock every time. So theoretically, you could wait until 7 o'clock and join. But anyway, who needs peaches? I don't like peaches. I think they're one of the worst fruit that's out there. And for that matter, who needs a Peach Bowl? Penn State loses 38-25. We've got transfer portal news. We've got a lot to break down from the Peach Bowl and provide our thoughts into things. It's going to be a pretty girthy episode. So thanks for being here. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Here we go. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Cory Lestochi. With me, as always, Sean Kane. How are you doing today, Sean?
I'm not the great Sean Kane anymore. I'm just Sean Kane.
Did I forget the great? I'm sorry.
You did. It's okay.
You're giving me a really intimidating look. I didn't really know how to feel at that exact moment.
Yeah, I think I was giving you the look of a man whose both teams fell on their faces this weekend, as Penn State did. And then the Dolphins fell harder because they don't have opt-out excuses.
No. You know, if it makes you feel better, I lost my fantasy football championship. So 3 leagues, 3 playoff appearances, 1 first-round knockout, 1 semifinal knockout, and 1 championship knockout. So not a great weekend in that regard.
Yeah, tis the season for fantasy disappointments. I only won 1 fantasy league in my life, so.
Me too.
I mean, and
Sean, do me a smidgen and just put that camera just a little bit further down for me, just a smidgen. Penn State loses 38-25. We've got a deep show tonight. We're going to give some quick initial thoughts on the Peach Bowl. We're going to talk about the transfer portal because there was some news today regarding a one Julian Fleming. I want to talk about bowl opt-outs, not ad nauseum, but just a little bit. I want to talk about Drew Allar. I want to talk about the wide receiver room. I want to talk about the defense in the Peach Bowl. I want to talk about the young guys who got to play, and we'll wrap it up with fan questions. Does that sound like a plan?
Let's do it.
Sweet. So Peach Bowl initial thoughts, Sean. They lost 38-25. It was at one point worse than that. Penn State's got down scoring to make it look closer than it really was. They were able to do that in all 3 losses this year. So I guess that's a good thing. But it wasn't very good there, especially in the second half. It was close at halftime. Some could argue it was only close because of maybe some fortunate plays, like the Nick Singleton catch and run. It was a good play, but I don't know if you could necessarily say like that was something they could go back to later in the game. Kind of seemed like a one-time thing for the Beulah to Singleton touchdown. But in the second half, it was all Ole Miss. No questions about that. Their offense looked really good, and Penn State's defense obviously was not looking its normal self. Talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Sean, one thing I want to make sure I say early before we talk about anything else, and that is I want to give a huge shout out for the last time on this show to Daquan Hardy. This is obviously the Hardy fan club. We really appreciate what Daquan Hardy was able to give to us as far as excellent plays and effort throughout his career. And to cap that off with a Peach Bowl, just straight up effort. Played over 80 snaps in the Peach Bowl. Not a lot of guys in the era of opt-outs, in the eras of sitting out, declaring for the NFL draft, whatever. Not a lot of guys are playing that amount of snaps, even on Penn State's team. So not afraid to go out there and just give it all. And I really respect that. He is kind of the role model for giving it everything you've got. So shout out to Daquan Hardy, giving us his very best one last time in the Peach Bowl.
Sounds like a nominee for a Hardy Award.
It does. It does sound exactly like that. And what Sean's referencing there, Don't exactly know when that's going to take place, but we will be doing the annual Hardee's Awards like we did before. I think this year, Sean, I might let people vote. I might let people actually go out there and vote for who they think should win the different awards. We'll post the awards on social media. You'll know where they are and what awards are out there. I'm thinking that episode will probably be in a week or two, and that will kind of be the bookend of season 3. And we call that season 3 because that's the 3rd season that we've been doing this. So that will be the bookend of the 2023 season. And then the 2024 season sort of begins after that. So that's how we'll wrap it up with the Hardee's. But Sean, just quick initial thoughts coming out of the Peach Bowl.
Yeah, disappointing, of course. We were a favorite, and both Cory and I picked Penn State to win, and just didn't go that way. And the defense got, kind of got their doors blown off. And obviously, a large part of that is we didn't have our 2 dynamic corners. We didn't have our best pass rusher. We only had a half of Curtis Jacobs. We only had a half of Adisa Isaac. But nonetheless, I mean, they got it done. And Utah last year was affected by opt-outs. Dalton Kincaid, who's killing it right now with the Bills, and Clark Phillips both opted out. So that's kind of the name of the game right now. So that's just something you have to be able to roll with the punches with. And Penn State had more to worry about, had more opt-outs than Ole Miss did, and it showed. And Ole Miss whooped our butts. Do I think the defense would have looked better with those guys playing? Of course. But then you go to the offense, and the offense looked like how it did most games, especially when we played against teams with a pulse. And that was a bit disappointing that we didn't see any growth over the bowl practices. It just looked the same. Keandre Lambert-Smith didn't play much. Dante Cephas did not play. I don't believe Malik McClain played, so that was also something.
I think Keandre Lambert-Smith, to your point, had the lowest snap count of the season so far. I think, don't quote me on this, I think it was 26 offensive snaps.
I saw somewhere in the 20s, so I don't think you're too far off either way. I did think we did some good things on offense, ran the ball all right, went away from the run. I thought too early. I thought we could have stayed a little more committed to it, but we didn't. Drew Allar did not play well, and neither did the receivers. Receivers didn't have a catch for the 4th quarter. So definitely a disappointing day. No other way to put it. And just kind of on to West Virginia next year.
The running thing to me, it was really kind of bizarre. Ole Miss came out and did not stack the box to stop the run. I don't really know what film they watched over the break, but they were giving Penn State running looks in those first couple drives. They were not giving Penn State running looks pretty much after that. And that was pretty evidently clear. So there were holes to run early, and then Ole Miss continued to put more people in the box. That is when you then have to be able to throw the football, and Penn State, per the entire season, wasn't able to do that. Same kind of problem. Not enough separation on the outside, not enough willingness to throw the ball into tight windows and give people a chance. Just not enough of any of that to really keep the defense on their heels and to stay balanced, even just a little bit. Drew Allar had a bad game. The statistics, when it's all said and done, don't look awful, Sean, but there was a tipped pass that was caught and ran for like 75 yards there. And then there was, I think he got another 46 yards on the final drive when they scored, when things were already settled. So a big chunk of his yardage came on a lucky play that honestly probably could have been picked, or when the result was already in hand.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't play well again. I think he only played well against a good defense once. That was Iowa. And keep in mind, Iowa's defense was on the field for 45 minutes when we played them. So a little bit easier to play well against a defense that's constantly on the field. And yeah, again, receivers just didn't step up. I mean, when you don't have a catch till the fourth quarter, two things are happening. Number one, your quarterback really isn't giving you much of a chance to go make a play, because I don't think he threw to them very often, a few times, but not too often. But then receivers didn't make the most of it. Harrison Wallace had a drop early that I think kind of set us back a little bit, frankly. And KLS had a drop. So, I mean, there were some plays there that they didn't make. And I'm sure, and we heard on the broadcast too, the receivers a lot of times weren't open downfield. So it's a combination of both. And that's been the story this year. I mean, anybody who's watched this season knows what the story has been. Now, I think where we get into differences in opinion is who to pin it on. And I think, and we're going to get into this all throughout the show, there's a bunch of blame to go around, and I feel like the receivers have borne the brunt of it from the fan base and, frankly, the coaching staff.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that more in a second. One other random thought, just the amount of blown coverages on defense, just not gonna get the job done when it's all said and in fact, the one blown coverage, I want to say, was technically on Cam Miller's side. I don't know if they were supposed to be in man coverage and somebody else played zone, but Cam Miller's played a decent amount of football for that to, shouldn't happen. And that was one of them. And then one of them was on Rojas, when Quinshon Judkins kind of just came out of the backfield and no one picked him up. That was right after Carter came out. But the point is, there's a lot of blown coverages, and that didn't really happen very much. Maybe one against Indiana, but for the most part, they've done really good. So that was a little uncharacteristic. And then the turnovers, Penn State 0-2, -2 on the day in turnovers. We thought Penn State was going to win the turnover battle. Now, again, a lot of the guys that you would think would force those turnovers and get you those turnovers didn't necessarily play. They had the one that was really close. I think it was rightfully called incomplete, but that's, so close and would have made a huge difference, obviously. But they didn't get there in time. And so just those little things didn't add up, but still surprised that Penn State went -2. And honestly, one of the giveaways for Penn State was absolutely horrible by Drew Allar. Wasn't open even if he didn't get hit. He shouldn't have ever even considered throwing it. I think he even said after the game that it was a stupid decision. So he's taken the fall for that too. But just overall, not a good decision. He also gets hit, which makes it even worse. But it was never going to be completed anyway. So that was just a really bad, uncharacteristic at that point too for Allar, given that's his only second interception of the year. But just overall not great.
No, not at all. Another big play I thought was Jackson Dart's near fumble. And I did think initially we got that, but his arm was just moving forward, and that ended up being an incomplete pass. So, and you need some luck sometimes, and the luck just wasn't on our side on Saturday. And I mean, I'm not sure how much of a difference it would make. I think with teams, the way we were versus how they were better. They were better on Saturday. So it was no coincidence that they won. I think they were more locked in than we were. And a lot of times I think it's lazy when people try to say, like, oh, this team just wanted it more. No, they both want it. They both want to win. But I just got a vibe from Penn State that they didn't quite want it as much as Ole Miss wanted it. It was Ole Miss's first chance at an 11-win season. And did that factor into, a lot less opt-outs, maybe a more focused mentality that Penn State had after they just won the Rose Bowl last year? Yeah, it probably did. So, and now is that an excuse? No, that's the opt-out's not so much, but like it's still on our coaching staff to be able to get our guys up and ready to compete. And it was really no contest, which was disappointing, I think, even with the opt-outs. Because I don't think Ole Miss is that great. I think they're very, very good. Very good. I don't think they're 7 leagues better than Penn State. That's kind of how it looked at times Saturday.
Yeah, and one thing I think you have to separate this game into the offense and the defense, because defensively, I think all the excuses are warranted as far as what you saw. But offensively, that was pretty much what we'd seen all season, and they didn't really have that many opt-outs on the offensive side of things. There's not really any excuse against an Ole Miss defense that isn't very good. So I think you kind of have to separate the two. And now, granted, this offense really is trying to basically wait for an opportunity from the defense to strike, and the defense never provided it. But that's basically what Penn State's offense had been all year, was run the ball, take care of the football, and wait for the defense to give you good field position, basically. And they didn't really do that, and they also didn't take care of the football. But that to me, there's no excuse for how poor they were there.
Yeah. When you're a ball possession team, you don't possess the ball. No bueno.
Good.
No,
Not good. Let's move on to. I just wanted to mention one more thing. Thought Nick Singleton played really well. He's had back-to-back good games now. That does give me some good confidence as far as where he is heading into his junior season. So that was a nice turnaround for him. I feel like the hype is back to where it was before the season started with him. And I think that makes me feel a little bit better knowing he was able to kind of get back to his old self.
I agree. And I think Drew Shelton filled in nicely for Olu and Donka and Perwalis as well. So overall, I was generally pretty happy with how the offensive line played. They had their moments where things didn't go great, but I thought they played all right.
Well, let's jump over to portal news. Earlier, I think it was today, maybe it was the other day. Defensive linebacker Jake Wilson entered the transfer portal. Didn't play a whole lot for Penn State, but he enters the portal. And then today, not very long ago, wide receiver Dante Cephas officially enters the transfer portal. Sean, let's talk about Dante Cephas for a second. For the first time, truly for the first time in Penn State, and maybe Eric Wilson, maybe, but as far as big time whiff in the transfer portal, it's Dante Cephas. This is supposed to be a guy that was going to come in here and at the very least be a strong wide receiver 2 for you. Originally, people thought he was going to be wide receiver 1. And that surely wasn't the case. He's back in the transfer portal now. And remember, like, everybody really wanted Dante Cephas. Like, he was a big get coming out of the portal. It just didn't work, Sean. And I think it really hurt that he wasn't able to arrive in the spring as far as slowing down his development. But also, I don't really know how much more time it would have taken for him to get there anyway. So he just didn't know the playbook, is what it seems like. How many times did we see him and Drew Allar not on the same page as far as running routes or the ball not being where Cephas thought it was going to be? It was at least 3 or 4 times. He really only went out there to run slants and fade routes. And although he did have some success at the end of the year, 2 touchdowns, 11 catches in 3 games in November, if that's the best you're going to get out of him, it's kind of a failed experiment, unfortunately. And wish him nothing but the best. It just didn't work out. And I don't know exactly what happened between the last game and the Peach Bowl, but to not even have a snap when there wasn't even true number one at that point, to not even have a snap. I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was Franklin specific. I think it was Franklin specifically that mentioned accountability. So I don't know if he just wasn't working hard, he wasn't practicing hard, if he wasn't getting good grades, if whatever was going on. I'm not going to speculate, but clearly he wasn't doing whatever he needed to do from a leadership, teammate, off the field perspective. And that hurt. And once he didn't play in the Peach Bowl, I don't think it's any surprise that he jumped in the transfer portal. Yeah, I just failed experiment. Don't necessarily know if it's anyone's specific fault, but it's disappointing to say the least.
Yeah, and you do wonder with him not playing in the Peach Bowl, how much did that have to do with him entering the portal? Was he already in the portal but not in the portal? And maybe there was a discussion between him and the coaching staff, and they had a understanding. That's quite an understanding to just not play you. So I don't know what happened there. But yeah, I mean, I was somebody who really liked what I saw from Dante Cephas at Kent State, and I'm not alone in that. And I thought it was going to work here, but a couple things. It seems like, judging from what we saw, yeah, he probably had trouble grasping the playbook. But then you have to also wonder, how much is it physical? It is a huge jump going from the MAC to the Big Ten. And going from being, we talk about this in high school a lot, guys out of high school, big fish in a small pond, versus going and being at a premier school, trying to compete for a national championship. And it just, maybe he didn't belong at this level. It could just be as simple as that from a physical perspective, I mean. And then combine that with the mental lapses. Yeah, you're gonna have a tough time, and I think it's too bad. And it was just disappointing. And last year we brought in Dante Cephas, we brought in Malik McLean. I mean, we'll see with Malik what happens. He's still a young guy. I still think he has a chance. I like his physical attributes, but he didn't play much this season. And the few times we saw him, we saw some flashes, but overall, not what we needed. So we struck out in the portal when we really needed. We really needed guys in the portal, and that helped make us a 10-3 football team this year.
Yeah. I really thought he had turned the page a little bit in that Maryland game.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen. And again, I don't know the specifics on it, but Malik McLean may have played special teams. He may have been out there for a route or two. For all intents and purposes, he didn't play in the Peach Bowl either. So both wide receiver transfer portal additions don't play in the Peach Bowl. Didn't really play very much when it was all said and done for the year. If you're curious, I'll just give you the numbers. Malik McLean and Dante Cephas combined for 28 catches and just over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is less than Theo Johnson's stat line by himself, and or Tyler Warren, whatever one you want to choose.
Wow. And
close to Nick Singleton's, actually. Nick Singleton, 26 catches for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, just not what we needed. And I think it was Tyler Donahue on Twitter. He pointed out since 2016, the stats that the wide receiver number 2 have gotten. And this year, well, I could quote it, but I could tell you while I'm looking at this. Cephas was in the 200s.
Yeah.
As far as yards go. So, I mean, that's not what you need at this point from a wide receiver number 2. Like, you need more production from that. We just lacked it. So here it is. 2020. So in 2023, Dante Cephas, 22 catches, 246 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2022, Parker Washington was our wide receiver number 2. He had 46 catches, 611 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2021, Parker Washington, 64 catches, 820 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then COVID year, where we still had wide receiver number 2 still had more catches and more yards. So we could go on, but that just shows you right there. Just not what you need from a wide receiver 2. And I feel like Parker Washington is the quintessential wide receiver number 2. And that's just not what we got from Mr. Cephas this year, or anybody else for that matter. Because
Right.
nobody else stepped up either, because he was our second leading receiver second leading wide receiver.
Right. Yeah, you had Tyler Warren, Theo Johnson, and Nicholas Singleton all had more catches than the next wide receiver after Keandre Lambert-Smith. Excuse me.
Yeah, and then I was going to say our wide receiver 1 fell off the face of the earth in November. So
yeah,
that doesn't help.
Which is weird because he had a really good November the previous year.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention and all that, and not an excuse, but I think it's worth highlighting, and it's not his fault, but Trey Wallace, disappointing year, 19 catches, 1 touchdown. He was banged up, it seems like, for most of the year. So, but that hurts you, right? Because at the very least, you're thinking between Trey Wallace and Dante Cephas, and it sounds funny in hindsight, but and Amari Evans, you think of those 3 guys, you think you have a 2 and a 3 out of those guys. Like somebody has to be good enough to be a 2, and someone else has to be. So even if Dante Cephas doesn't turn into a 2, he maybe is a 3, and Trey Wallace can be your 2, or vice versa, or Amari Evans, whatever the case is. No, no. I want to talk wide receivers more, but I want to wait a little bit because I want to stick on the transfer portal and make everyone's day a little bit better. Before I do, I just want to mention that Penn State did lose 2 defensive analysts to Duke. They came here with Manny Diaz. They're going to stay with Manny Diaz. I think one of them upgraded to a safeties assistant coach position. I wanted to mention that. But let's not bury the lead. Penn State officially gets wide receiver Julian Fleming from the transfer portal from Ohio State. Was in the 2020 class, the coveted player from Pennsylvania just down the road, chose Ohio State over Penn State. I don't know. Maybe you need to go back, for some of you listeners out there, and go find your tweets and make sure you delete them, because I'm sure some of you said some pretty awful things back in the day. But he's come home and provides a lift. I don't think it's, and Sean, you've said this before, you were adamant before that, yes, Julian Fleming would be a great addition, but you want another wide receiver as well. I was like, I would be okay with Keandre Lambert-Smith, Dante Cephas, and Julian Fleming. Well, now you don't have Dante Cephas, and honestly, after what we've seen in November, I don't know how good I feel about Keandre Lambert-Smith. So I'm in the same camp as you if I'm going to change my answer, Sean, and say you still got to get somebody. But what are your thoughts about Penn? Thank you. What are your thoughts about Penn State landing Julian Fleming?
Yeah, it was expected for a while. It seemed like after it was pretty clear that he wasn't going to Nebraska, that he was going to come to Penn State. I don't think he visited anywhere else besides those 2 schools. And I don't think he really needed the fanfare. It just kind of happened one day in the middle, right before the semester starts. So great addition. He's an adult, which really, really helps. I think he's going to be a leader in this room from day one. He is big on doing the little things well. I saw on Twitter, I forget who I saw it from. PFF rated him the number 2 blocker on Ohio State's team. So not just the receivers, the team. So one thing that we were missing this year, low key, was wide receivers blocking. He's a willing blocker. He's going to go in and do the dirty work. He's been, now I know he hasn't, it hasn't gone quite the way that he probably wished it's gone at Ohio State, but he was playing behind Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr. He's playing behind Ibuka. Like they have a lot of guys, and it's a tough room to break through. And he played. So it's not like he never got on the field at all. He played a lot. but he was just the number 3 option most years. And he's going to be asked to be the number 1 guy here in all likelihood, unless somebody else comes down the line. And that's going to be an adjustment for him. And the good thing is he has seen a lot. He's been around a lot of great guys. He's played for Brian Hartline, who, for my money, is the best receivers coach in the business. So he's really what this room was looking for. Now, do we need more? Absolutely. I mean, we need at least one more receiver in my mind. And you never know what's going to happen with the receivers, who might leave, who might transfer out, who might declare for the draft. I don't think any of these receivers should be going in the draft, but it may be a different room next season than we saw this year. So very happy to have Mr. Fleming finally aboard.
Yeah, hopefully enjoys that new truck by Blaze Alexander.
Yes.
I want to stick on the wide receivers, actually, since we've already gone down this rabbit hole so much. We'll just move ball opt-outs to after it. But, Sean, before I do that, I do have some breaking news for you. Some good breaking news.
Lay it on me. I love good news.
Returning for another season is veteran defensive tackle Devon Ellis.
Hey.
Which I don't know if anybody played more consistent and provided more leadership than Devon Ellis in the second half of the season. I thought, for as much of a question mark that defensive tackle was going into the season, Devon Ellis and Zane Durant kind of calmed that down a little bit. Now, he's not the only one that could come back. Hakeem Beamon has a decision to make as well. But getting Devon Ellis back, you could argue, as far as big guy, because Zane Durant's not a huge guy. As far as big guy who plays that one tech, you've got to be really happy to have Devon Ellis back. He's versatile, but he's also a big body, and he made some big plays as far as like true, not just soaking up offensive linemen, but literally going and getting tackles for loss as well. So this is a big get. As far as one less thing you have to maybe question going into the spring, getting Devon Ellis back makes you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue he improved this year more than just about anybody on the team. Like, just a really consistent player from the first game to the last. And like you said, what he provides from a leadership perspective, I think he learned a lot being behind PJ Mustipher. He's a similar player to PJ, not identical, but very similar. And I think he filled in that leadership gap. So huge to have Devon Ellis back. Very welcome. Very welcome good news in a week that hasn't had we had Fleming, but we've been looking for some good news. So love to have Devon back.
Yeah, big time. Like I said, you're going to get Zane Durant back. Still got to wait for Hakeem Beamon, but that room you're feeling better about. I don't know what Vandenberg.
Could Izzard come back?
He could. Izzard could come back as well. So you gotta have to wait for Izzard. You don't know where Vandenberg stands, but now then you're talking about some of the younger guys after that, right? Too. Are those younger guys going to start making an impact as well? So Tariq Blanding is a name to keep an eye on, and where's he at in his development? And then your boy, you got to assume Andrews is involved as well.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to make an impact early from a defensive tackle, but you never know. And then I got to think of Izzard's mom when during the game on Saturday.
That was her. That was her. That was her. Okay,
yeah,
that was funny.
She said, yeah, she got on TV for a second and said what we were all thinking. It's on Twitter. Go look it up. But yeah, definitely great news. Great news on this Wednesday night. A couple of good things happened today.
It does. It makes you feel a little bit better. I know I'm not going to jump on the hype train for 2025 or 2024 just yet.
Yeah, we're winning the Natty now.
But it makes me. It does. It does provide a little bit of like I don't know, a good feeling inside, I guess is the easiest way to put it. Speaking of not good feeling, let's just stick with wide receivers since we've talked about wide receivers so much already. Let's just finish that conversation. The wide receivers didn't have a catch until the fourth quarter in the Peach Bowl. Just really struggled to help. And after the game was over, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Caden Saunders tweeted some things. Dante Cephas didn't tweet, but he liked some things about maybe what the issues are. I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't mind players telling us how they feel. I wish they'd do it more. I wish they would maybe do it in a better setting, but honestly, whatever. It's, it's a free country. Do what you think is best. But I will say this. This is the only thing that upset me about what went down on Twitter that night. And I wasn't paying close attention to it. So I'm not going to sit here like I have all the facts straight. But I do know, per Audrey Snyder, I think she talked about this in her article on The Athletic, that they asked questions to Keandre Lambert-Smith, at least. I don't know if they asked questions to Caden Saunders, so I'm not going to say that. But I know for sure that they asked questions to Keandre Lambert-Smith, and he declined to answer them. So he had an opportunity to speak what he was thinking to the media and elected to not do it then, but to then come later on and tweet something. How I was raised, how I view that, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I have no issue if you want to call out fans for saying, for criticizing the receiving corps. That is absolutely your right. But I would do that maybe in a more professional setting than Twitter, but whatever you want to do. That's not how I would do it, but you do whatever you want. But it does irk me that he had the opportunity, declined it, to then just say something on Twitter. That's not how I would do things. I also don't necessarily like the Caden Saunders tweet from the sense of shifting the blame to, say, the offensive coordinator or the quarterback or whoever else. Now, I do think the receivers have been the scapegoat for more than they deserve. I think they've gotten the raw end of the deal as far as everyone just blaming the receivers. I get their frustration when everyone says they're just not good. I think it was Caden Saunders who said it was not a talent problem. Well, I don't care what the problem is. I don't care if it's a talent problem. I don't care if it's an offensive coordinator problem. I don't care if it's a quarterback problem. Whatever you think it is, why did that problem not get any better throughout the year? That's probably the biggest thing, Sean, that I'm upset about. It wasn't that they laid an egg in the Peach Bowl. It was, did we really see any improvement as the season went along? At any point, did we think, wow, these guys are at least getting better from where they started?
They got
No.
worse.
Right. So that to me is where I get upset. It's the shifting blame to others, which, okay, fair enough. You're frustrated that everyone's coming after your squad. I respect that. But what have you done to make things better? I'm not saying it's all your fault, but what have you done to make things better? And if you can sit there honestly and look me in the eyes and say you've done everything you can to help this offense, okay, fine. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Plenty of blame to put on offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich. Plenty of blame to put on quarterback Drew Allar. Plenty of blame to put on these wide receivers. But I don't think anybody should be tweeting afterwards trying to shift blame towards anybody else. Because A, I don't think that's how problems get solved. And B, I don't think anyone has any sort of room to talk if you're on that offensive side of the field.
Yeah. After this, I'm going to turn to Twitter and just rip Cory about all the things he doesn't do well on the podcast.
Yeah,
because that's
most notably lately, I guguess, my internet.
Yeah, I'm going to rip his internet service. Yeah, it's I heard Herman Edwards one time. He was talking to a group of rookies, and he was talking about when you send the tweet, everybody sees it. You can't take it back. You could delete it even. Doesn't matter. It's out there. And it's going to be on. Now he's talking NFL guy, so he was saying it'll be on ESPN or it'll be here or there. I mean, for us, the diehard fans who follow this stuff, we know about it. And it's going to be reported on by the local media at least somewhat. That, yeah, they tweeted this. And then get a load of this. Keandre Lambert-Smith didn't talk to the media after. Like, he went and dodged questions. So yeah, that's not how you solve things. That's not being a leader. That's being a child, in my opinion. So it's very disappointing to see. But that's the route Keandre has taken the last 2 months. So
I'm just
disappointing.
curious how you stay in the locker room or how you then resolve that after something like that. Like, that to me is a little surprising. To say that, and did you wait till the season was over? So like you're just gonna enter the transfer portal? Because the transfer portal is all but closed at this point for now. So I think the New Year's Six Bowls and the playoffs get a little bit longer, but for everyone else, it's officially closed. So they might have a little bit more time, but not much. And
I
then
thought
you
it
have
was
to.
just the playoff teams.
I thought so too, but Zakee Wheatley's dad tweeted us and said they had an extended period as well.
Okay.
Which,
Then he would know.
which don't say that means Zakee Wheatley's entering the transfer portal.
No, but they know.
But they know. And so
Yeah.
I don't know how long that extension is. I'm guessing maybe it's a week. And now, granted, if you're in the transfer portal, you can commit whenever to your new school, but you just have to be in basically by now if you're not a New Year's Six team. So we'll keep an eye on that, but otherwise you have to wait till May. So I'm a little surprised that Keandre Lambert-Smith didn't enter today.
I mean, he might declare for the draft.
That's
Good
true.
luck with that. But he might.
And I didn't think about that. That's a good point. He might
But
just be doing that.
maybe he sticks around. But like you said, I mean, it sounds like him and Drew have some issues to work on at the very least. And same thing with Caden Saunders. And Caden Saunders, like, dude, you barely played.
And Caden Saunders
really,
came in with Drew Allar.
Yeah. Like, I thought they were buddies and everything. And I don't know, man. Like, just
The reason I don't
know.
like the tweeting, and I don't want to harp on it. Go ahead.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's just not a great look. And like you said, do I understand them being frustrated because they were basically beat up on the whole year? Yeah. And if anybody, we on this show have talked more about everybody else. A lot of people just hyper focus on the receivers, and the receivers weren't good enough. I'm not saying they were, but I mean, Drew didn't do a great job getting them the ball, even when they were open. And that's just a fact. We have video evidence of it. But that's just not the way you solve problems, especially when you're on a team together. Like, Cory and I are on a team together. We're not going to call each other out in public if we have an issue with each other. We're going to talk about it because that's what adults do. And the truth is, like, we're a small podcast. They are Penn State Football. So it is incumbent on them to be able to figure this stuff out behind the scenes.
Nobody would even care if I called you on Twitter.
No, that's the thing. Nobody would care about us, but like, people do care about this. And as far as getting mad at fans, and I think we're going to touch on this a little later. Look, the fans have the right to speak their minds too. And I think there's some mentality with some athletes that, oh, well, if you never played before, you don't get it. Are there some things that I wouldn't get? Yeah, there are. But I could watch a game, as I've been doing for 20 plus years now, and say, this isn't good enough. Like, I could do that. Like, it is our right to do that. And with NIL, which is paid by the fans, they have more right to say what they want now. Now, that doesn't mean be an asshole. And there are assholes out there. But they have a right to criticize you and to read and react, watch and react. Again, my one rule on here, and I don't have agendas against players. Do I have some guys that I like better than others? Okay, sure. But if you do good things, I will say good things about you. I think I've said good things about almost every guy that we cover. I will also say some not so good things about you if I see not so good things on the field. That's my rule. And I have the right to do that, as does every other fan. But again, don't be a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. I think I said pretty much everything I wanted to say on that. I did want to finish with this, actually. How much of this is on Marcus Hagans? Sean. Some people are already asking for him to be fired on X. I disagree with that. I know you probably do too. That being said, when does it officially become his problem? Is it like now officially his problem? I would say yes, starting now, he needs, like, if we're at this point next year, it's on Marcus Higgins. He was given a really raw deal as far as what Stubbs left behind. Obviously doesn't have anybody that he's recruited or portaled in. The fact that he got, I think, three good wide receivers in the 2024 class is a good sign. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think only Peter Gonzalez is the only one that's enrolling early, and he's still, we don't really know, how much he's going to contribute right away. So you don't maybe have an impact with those first three guys because they're probably not going to be able to get on the field right away. Although, what do I know at this point with where the receivers stand? But he does get Julian Fleming, which is a pretty big addition and a step in the right direction, we think. But when does it officially become his problem, Sean, if it hasn't already?
December 30th at about 3:30 p.m. it became his problem. And I'll say this about Higgins. Did anything get better as the year went on? No. And that is partly on you. Now, do I think he inherited a great room? Not necessarily. I don't think it's as talent deficient as some people think. And and there's no doubt Stubblefield missed on some recruits. I'm not saying he didn't, he did. But like, we do have 4-star guys. We do have, yeah.
Let me just correct myself here.
Go ahead.
Gonzo is not coming early. Josiah Brown is coming early, and that's why I was thinking injuries, because he's still banged up. So he's coming early, but he's still got to get healthy. So they don't really have any wide receivers that are healthy coming in as early enrollee. I just wanted to clarify or correct myself.
Yep, you're good. So yeah, you have a bunch of 4-star guys. Keandre Lambert-Smith's a 4-star guy. Harrison Walls, 4-star guy. Dante Cephas is not, but I think he was considered a 4-star in the portal, I believe. So, I mean, he was seen to have some talent. Malik McClain was a 4-star guy. Caden Saunders was a high 4-star guy. So it's not like there's no talent at all in the room. I think that's a misnomer that that we don't have any talent. We do. And that's the one thing that they tweeted that I do partially agree with, that there is talent there. So what's the issue? I think it's a lack of leadership. And I don't think Keandre Lambert-Smith is a leader. I think that's evident. And that's very disappointing that he hasn't been able to grow up and become a leader, but he hasn't. And I do think that's going to be where Fleming will come in and take that leadership role. I do expect that. It wouldn't shock me. I think he'd be the first guy ever in Penn State history to be this. I think he has an outside chance to be a captain next year. Because I think he's gonna take that role in that room. But it also comes down to the coach. Like, you didn't do anything to make this room better this season, and that partly is on Marquise Higgins. Now, do I think he should be fired? No. But he showed me, I mean, he presided over the worst wide receiver room we've seen in 20 years at Penn State. So I'm not going to pretend like he did a great job. He didn't.
Right. I want to say there was a transfer that came in and did become, well, Brisker technically became a captain, but I want to say Arnold Ebiketie became a captain too.
He may have. And I know that there's a lot more captains now than there used to be. He may have. I know people, the guys loved AK, Arnold Ebiketie on the team. So I do know that I think it's going to be a similar thing with Julian Fleming too.
Right. And I don't think Mitch Tinsley was officially a captain, but Mitch Tinsley was just on the pod on State Media and spoke really well about his time at Penn State, and he was clearly loved as well. Yeah, I think leadership's a big thing, Sean. And I think that's why I don't blame Marcus Hagans, because at the end of the day, you can't get the guys to practice harder. Nate Bauer alluded to it multiple times. Like, if you bench one guy and the next guy isn't really working hard, well, then what are you going to do? You can't just bench them all. Someone's got to go out there. So I don't know. It just seems like in general that wide receiver room needs a little bit of a facelift or at least a kick in the butt.
And sometimes it happens with the players. I think I've heard, I don't know if it was Don Shula or some great coach said, like, the best teams, the players coach themselves. And they find that way to, they don't need the coach holding their hand through everything. And they kind of handle their own stuff. And I think that's been the case. I think that's been the case at Penn State too. I think in 2022 is a great example of that. That it wasn't James Franklin or even Manny Diaz or Mike Yurcich get up in front of the room. It was PJ Mustipher. It was Sean Clifford. Like, those were the guys that that were their leaders in that room. And I think Theo Johnson did a little bit of that this year. And I think Devon Ellis too, but outside of them, I don't think there's enough this year, especially in that wide receiver room where I think from what we see, it seemed a bit toxic. So
really miss Parker Washington.
Blood. Yeah, Parker too. I mean, Tinsley, like, those guys, they worked. Like, they knew what it took to be great, and they knew what it took to do their best, and that's what they did. And there was just a level of maturity that was missing this year. And just going to work every day and take care of your business.
Let's jump over to bowl opt-outs, Sean. So for people that weren't aware exactly how it all went down, Penn State did not announce officially that Olu Fashanu, Kalen King wouldn't be playing until like an hour and a half before the game officially started. There was never a clear, definitive, like, yes or no before that. Technically, Olu's graphic said he would be there. Kalen King didn't come out with anything. But all week, James Franklin harped about the culture for only having one opt-out, when really it was already two because Johnny Dixon just disappeared. So you already had two in that sense. But in reality, as far as, like, not playing in the game, I don't care what you want to call it, like, opting out wise, you had Chop Robinson, Johnny Dixon, Olu Fashanu, and Kalen King all didn't play at all, which I respect some of those guys being there. Even Chop Robinson was there, but that is still opting out of the game. I have no issue with a player doing that, by the way, but it was weird that they didn't know. And Sean, the question really is, was it a gamesmanship thing? Was Franklin trying to get some sort of advantage to not let Lane Kiffin and company know that they were going to be without Kalen King specifically? Or was James Franklin blindsided, just like everybody else? Because I will give you the explanation from safety Jalen Reed, who said he didn't know that Kalen King wasn't playing until Saturday, until the day of the game. And I'm guessing if James Franklin knew before Saturday, he would have told his players accordingly before Saturday. And so, and if that's the case, if Kalen King pulled, a 180 on everybody last second, why? And what does that say about the true culture that is at Penn State right now? And if that's something to be concerned with. So either way, I don't know if it's a good thing. Was Franklin just trying to be cute with it? I think that's honestly disrespectful to all the people that make that trip. Or was Franklin lied to? And we're never going to get clarification on any of this, by the way. But either way, Sean, I feel like it's kind of like an alarm bell as either way you want to slice it.
Yeah, my first inclination was it's gamesmanship. At least from, and I still think it's gamesmanship from Olu. Why was Olu practicing? it's just bizarre. And then he was dressed. It was just a weird thing. I don't get it. I guess he could be with the team. Chop, from what I understand, was with the team, but why are you going through practices if you're not going to play? I don't understand that. I
Only
don't.
thing I can think of is because we saw, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. We saw Curtis Jacobs re-enter the game when Tony Rojas got hurt, and because of the lack of depth at offensive tackle, I'm wondering if there was a emergency situation where Olu would have gone back in the game.
Yes, but like why? But then why was he listed as out on the press release?
Yeah,
Like you
I
wouldn't
don't know how
mark
much
him
that
out.
press release matters at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know either. I guess it would. Like maybe they'd be facing a fine if like this wasn't right. I don't know. I don't know that for sure. But as far as Kalen King goes, you practice all week. You have Franklin say we have a plan that was agreed to with Kalen King and his parents. I can't imagine that's the plan, especially that Jalen Reed didn't know. Like your teammates didn't know of this plan. Like, was it really just you and Franklin that cooked this up, and Franklin was okay with you saying like with keeping the team in the dark? I just don't think that makes sense, and I don't really get it. I thought the whole opt out thing was confusing. Both that they didn't play. We knew Johnny Dixon wasn't going to play. James Franklin flat out said it after our pod last week. And we knew Chop wasn't going to play. And then the players that did play only played the first half, and then we never saw him again, except Curtis Jacobs when he came in for a couple plays. So I thought it was very strange the way we approached this, especially all week when Franklin was saying, "Oh, he wasn't really shying away from the praise. That we do transfer or the culture here. We kind of disincentivizes opt-outs, and I don't know. We certainly had a lot of opt-outs or a lot of half opt-outs. So
And Lane Kiffin
I
praised him too, and Lane Kiffin had less opt-outs.
Yeah, like he said, Penn State is one of the standards for not having opt-outs. Well, that's some standard because we certainly had a lot of
Because
them.
his team had less than his did. So how does that make any sense?
And realistically, we only had 3 guys that really should have thought about opting out. Or, yeah, 3. Like Olu, Chop. I mean, in my mind, 2. But I guess you could say maybe Kalen King because I do think he's a borderline first-round pick. But I do think there's some stuff to be gained from playing. Look at Michael Penix Jr., who dominated the Sugar Bowl. He was a guy that probably was a borderline first-round pick.
He's QB6 right now, according to Mel Kiper before the game.
Yeah, like now he might have played himself into the top 10. And if he somehow beats Michigan and plays well again, he's a contender to be a top 3 pick.
Right.
So yes, bowl games could certainly help raise your profile. And I think a lot of guys could have really got helped by having.
Let me give a more
just played half a game or didn't play at all.
Let me give a more maybe not as big of an example. I don't know a better way to describe that, but Jesse Luketa, like basically put enough on film to get a spot in the NFL. Like that to me is what you're able to do. And he had a really good game in the Outback Bowl. That to me is what you're trying to do. I don't like the half playing, to be honest with you. I don't like it at all. I am totally okay in supporting the players and whatever they want to do. I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you why. They come out in the second half in a close game, and then you just watch your team kind of fall apart, and you just stand there and watch that. I don't know. I just don't like it. And they got to do what's best for them. But from like a leadership perspective, I feel like that's kind of like you're half doing it and you're half not doing it. And again, they don't owe us anything at that point. But I will always respect more the Daquan Hardys of the world who played the entire game really as a boundary corner, which that's not really his position, but giving it all he has. Like I will always respect that more. I appreciate what Theo Johnson and Curtis Jacobs and Caden Wallace and Adisa Isaac did, but I think I would like to see them play the whole game. And honestly, they might win if all of those guys play because Adisa Isaac was eating everybody's lunch. Curtis Jacobs, when Rojas got hurt and Curtis Jacobs came back in, he immediately got a stop right when he came back in the game. And you know, we're going to talk about the young guys in a second, but you would like to have Caden Wallace out there and Theo Johnson. I mean, I don't know how much he would have helped because it was so anemic at some point, but another weapon that you can trust out there would have probably helped in the passing game too. But my biggest thing, Sean, about the bowl opt-outs thing is for a second, ignore the result. Because I don't want this to be some sort of just sour grapes that Penn State lost. Because this is not my point to this. Ignore the result and just talk about what the team was that was out there. Without the defensive coordinator, without two starting corners, without two starting defensive ends in the second half, without two starting offensive tackles in the second half, without two linebackers, starting linebackers in the second half. That team, and that's not even all of them, but that team was a shell of what that team was all season. And from just the standpoint of going to a bowl game and having fans go to a bowl game, why would I pay money to go see that? Again, no disrespect to the guys that did what they had to do. I'm not blaming them at all. They do what's best for you. But that doesn't mean I have to then go spend my money to go to a Peach Bowl or to travel for a game like that. I have decided I will not be traveling for a non-playoff bowl game ever again. If I happen to be in town because my family lives in Florida, okay, maybe. But I wouldn't pay for a flight and a hotel room in Atlanta for a Peach Bowl ever again. Now, granted, we're going to a 12-team playoff. In a perfect world, that doesn't happen very often anymore. But I'm not going to spend the money to see the leftovers of what the team was during the whole season. That's just, and again, I'm a season ticket holder, etc. That just isn't worth it to me. Now, do I think the bowl games are completely meaningless? No, because I really enjoy seeing the young guys get an opportunity to play. It really is a nice little idea of where we're heading into the spring. So it's a little bit of a barometer. I actually love that aspect of it because we're crazy about Penn State football. But I'm not going to spend all that money to not see potentially 3 first-round picks, to not see a bunch of those guys. And for anybody who says, oh, it's not about seeing those guys, it's about supporting the team. Well, if it's just about supporting the team and you don't mind paying, then why don't you pay to go see the blue and white game? If that's not about supporting the team and that's not just a shell of what the team's going to be in the fall, why wouldn't you go and drop $1,000 to go see a blue and white game? Why wouldn't you do that? If it's the same thing, in my opinion, the product is almost identical, or at least the result is almost identical to a blue and white game at this point. It's a scrimmage, which again, we eat that up because we love seeing the young guys get a chance to play. But as far as paying that kind of money, I would like to see a little bit more of a product. And that's where college football is going to struggle. I mean, I think you maybe have to go to some version of NIT for college football once the 12-team playoff starts or something like that, because no one's going to care about who's in the Peach Bowl or whatever bowl if you're not in the 12-team playoff. So I don't know. That fired me up quite a bit, Sean. Again, ignore the result. Just straight up, you're not seeing the same team that was on the field. And a lot of people that went thought they were going to see a lot of those guys, and they didn't. It stinks.
Yeah. I mean, with these bowls, and we touched on this a little bit in the preview show. I mean, the teams are not the same anymore. I think you're crazy if you gamble on this stuff. Like, I don't see how you could possibly bet on this. Like, I'll give you an example. If you bet on Oregon State and Notre Dame, there's a phone number I need you to call. It's 1-800-GAMBLER. call them because you need help if you gambled on that. Because you had Notre Dame, who was missing multiple coordinators, who was missing their quarterback, who was missing their whole wide receiver core, and you had Oregon State, who was missing all of that plus their head coach. So you have issues if you gambled on that, and you borderline had issues if you bet on any non-playoff games. Like, it's just not the same teams anymore. And I do wonder if now that we're in the expanded playoff world, as soon as the title game's over on Monday, what happens? I did see that noted intellectual Danny Cannell actually had an interesting idea, and I've seen this talked about before, and it's moving the bowl games, the non-playoff games, to early next year and having a kickoff classic of sort. I think it's an idea because then the games will have some meaning and they'll just have some meaning next year. So I think it's an interesting way to think about it, but but then you feel bad for the Daquan Hardys of the world because then they don't get a bowl game. So there's a double. So it's tough then because that won't be for them. So then it's literally at that point for them, playoff or nothing. And then you do have to worry about the possibility. Now, I'm not yet convinced this is going to happen, but the possibility is there. What if guys start opting out of playoff games? And right now, I think, my mother always told me, don't worry about things that haven't happened yet. And I do think that's sound advice, but could I see it? Yeah, especially now that agents can talk to players so freely.
Yeah, that's I mean, at that point, what are you even doing, right?
Right. At that point, you're going to need the NFL to step in. And Franklin actually alluded to that in his joint press conference with Lane Kiffin, talking about the NFL possibly getting involved.
Yeah. So let's talk the young guys, and then we'll wrap up with Drew Allar, then we'll and questions. Zion Tracy, not his best day. I think Daniel Gallen of 24/7 Sports said he was baptized by fire. I think somebody on the Penn State football team didn't appreciate that comment, but he struggled. Trey Harris, we talked about Trey Harris multiple times. The 50-50 balls were 100-0 balls. He was catching everything. It was impressive performance. He's going to be playing in the NFL. It really wasn't fair for Zion Tracy in that regard, but
That's a guy who improved his draft stock, even though he's not coming out this year.
Right? Yeah, he's coming.
Also remember that.
Yep. The young defensive backs in general, I think, just struggled. And the talent's there, but they've got some work to do. I thought Cam Miller played okay, but they've got some work to do. Malik Washington played a little bit. I think he's got some work to do. Or Elliott Washington, sorry. I'm thinking about the 2025 quarterback for some reason. But overall, not great. I thought Tony Rojas really struggled. I know he got banged up, but the play where he didn't know where he was going, wide open Quinshon Judkins for a touchdown, that kind of stunk. I want to end it on positive notes here. Two things. I thought Anthony Dunca, we talked about him last year and how people need to remember him because we thought he continued and to really impress the staff. He did okay at right tackle, which we didn't think he was going to be playing offensive tackle, which I don't think anybody did. He didn't have any Ole moments. I don't know if he dominated. I'm not an offensive lineman expert by any stretch, but I didn't really see him out there struggling, which is a good sign. So I guess throw him into the mix. And what does that say that he went out there before, say, a Williams or an Ono? I don't know what that means. So that to me is interesting. I also want to throw this at you. I think this is from Tyler Donahue at 24/7. The most snaps by a freshman at 95 snaps. So he played the most of any of the freshmen, which is crazy to me. Which, if anybody had that on their bingo board, you're lying to me. And then I just wanted to mention Jamil Lyons. I think he's going to be a stud. I know it's January 3rd, 2024, and Jamil Lyons will only be a sophomore next year. But I think Jamil Lyons is a future first round pick. There, I'm just going to say that now. So,
John, you're lying in the sand.
yep, right now, January 3rd, 2024, Jamil Lyons will be a first round pick.
Well, I knew I was sold on Jamil Lyons when, during the Delaware game, when the stadium was clearing out, he just laid the wood on this one guy from Delaware, and I was like, oh, he's like that. So that's really when I saw, yeah, this guy is it. I agree with you, Donka. Thought he played well. I thought Drew Shelton played well too. I mean, we're familiar with him, but overall, I felt better about the tackles going into next year. And one thing we talked about a little bit, I think a couple episodes ago now, we didn't really know what will happen at right tackle now that Caden Wallace was going pro. I feel better if Anthony Donka's that guy. Still would like to go pick up another offensive tackle in the portal, just for some depth and to compete at that other tackle spot. But I think you have to feel decent about it. I hear you on Cam Miller. I thought he struggled quite a bit, but he's playing against the guy who's going to be playing on Sundays, and it was his first action where there's a lot on him. And I talked on Twitter on Saturday about how important the cornerbacks were for the defense and how everything, and you don't really think about it with this aggressive style defense, but we're able to be super aggressive because we had really good corners, and they would give you just a half second more to be able to get to the quarterback. And that is huge in this defense. And we just didn't have that on Saturday. Cam Miller looked like it was a baptism by fire, and I'm sorry if anybody doesn't like that, but it was. And he had a couple of moments. He hung in there. But overall, it wasn't great. Zion Tracy, same thing. Some learning moments, and they will learn. And I don't feel discouraged. I think we were texting during the game, and Cory said something along the lines of, they'll be all right. They're fine. They're getting a lot of experience for next year. And I said, yeah, next year's going to look great based on this, being a smart guy. But yeah, in all honesty, now that I've had a few days, they're going to be fine. And this will be good experience for them going up against top caliber guys like that, because they're going to be facing guys like that when we play the Ohio States and the Washingtons and the USCs of the world next season.
Yeah. Sean, we've come to that time.
We have.
Which, I mean, I listed it as the truth about Drew Allar in the description of the show tonight and put that on Twitter. If you've been following along, I don't know if we're going to say anything we haven't been saying all year, but we always spit the truth. And that's never going to change. I think we are very, Sean, what's the best word as far as how we treat and how we view people and players? I feel like fair isn't necessarily
realistic.
Yeah. And we're going to do that with everybody. And that's the receivers, that's the coordinators, that's the quarterbacks. And that's what we're going to talk about next is Drew Allar. I mentioned, heck, you can go all the way back to last year when there were some moments that concerned me. I wasn't ready to throw up the red flag or anything. But I think I really started harping on Drew Allar after the Ohio State game. We had that film breakdown, showed you some wide receivers, especially over the middle, that he refused to throw the football to. There are things that just haven't gotten better with Drew Allar over the course of the year. You can give all the caveats you want. He's a first-time starter, etc. Things will get better. What scares me, Sean, is not the physical traits. I think he has all the physical traits in the world. I think he has the arm strength. I think he has the accuracy at times. I think he has enough mobility. I think he's got all of the tools to be a really good, if not great quarterback in college football and in the NFL. Size, etc. I really think the problem, and I don't know if this improves or not. I'm not a quarterback guru. I really think the problem is inside the ears. And I don't mean like he's stupid. He's not stupid. I don't mean like he's crazy or not a good coachable player. I just think he lacks confidence. And it is very clear. You can see the difference between a confident quarterback and a non-confident quarterback when Drew Allar's out there versus Bo Prabula. Now, before all the Bo Prabula fan club gets on me and says, yeah, get Bo Prabula in there. It's about time. That's not what I'm saying at all, because I think Bo Prabula is not a very good passer. And I don't think he's a future at quarterback specifically. I think he's can provide some sparks in what we've seen this year. And I think Andy Kotelnicki will do a good job of continuing that. But the perfect solution to all of this, Sean, is that Drew Allar finds confidence, because you don't want to necessarily go to Bo Prabula, and I think you would hurt to do that. I think he offers some good things from a leg perspective, but if you want to be a national champion, you need Drew Allar to gain some confidence this offseason, because he lacked it all year. Now, is that because he didn't trust the wide receivers? Is that because he didn't trust that the wide receivers knew the routes? Is that because he just didn't think the wide receivers were any good? I don't really know. Was he just scared to make mistakes? I don't know. There's plenty of reasons for why he seemed a little timid. I don't have the great answer for it. But I will say this, Sean, and this is what drives me probably nuts the most, is everybody says, oh, they haven't given Drew Allar enough talent around him. Okay, that's probably fair. Like, we just talked about the wide receivers for like an hour. So I understand that. But, and I will scream and shout about this probably for the rest of my life. If you are a great quarterback, you find a way to elevate the players around you. You find a way. How many, like Tom Brady, for as meh as Sean thinks he is, threw the ball to a lot of guys that nobody will ever remember. Aaron Rodgers threw the ball to a lot of guys that nobody will ever remember. You can go down the list. Peyton Manning threw the ball to a lot of guys. I know he had a couple of really good guys too, but a lot of guys that nobody will ever remember. The great quarterbacks are able to elevate those around them. Heck, even Eli Manning, for that matter, elevates the wide receivers around them. We haven't seen that with Drew Allar. And we saw with a similar receiving core, Sean Clifford be able to put similar results or better results with a similar situation. Now, Parker Washington wasn't there. Mitchell Tinsley wasn't there. But is that really the difference from anemic to what we saw last year? Is that really the difference? Is Mitch Tinsley and Parker Washington? Because I don't believe that. There's no way it could have gotten that bad that quickly without just Parker Washington and Mitch Tinsley. So I think some of this, I think more of this than what people have said needs to fall on Drew Allar's shoulders. He is supposed to be the guy. He needs to be the guy. And I'll just wrap up with this, Sean. This was supposed to be the year at the bare minimum, at the end of the year this year, we were supposed to say, okay, he is no longer a prospect. He is a thing that we can count on going into 2024. Maybe he had some bumps and bruises along the way. There was some inconsistencies here and there, but he is the man. We are happy he is our leader, and he is going to lead us to great things in 2024. I don't know if anybody is saying that right now. It's, in fact, you have the Bo Prabula crowd that wants him, Bo Prabula to start. But I don't know if anybody is saying, I feel fantastic about Drew Allar heading into 2024, and he can accomplish anything. I don't know if anyone's saying that. And that is roughly where we were supposed to be at. At least he wasn't supposed to be the liability going to 2024. And I don't know if anybody can look me in the eyes and say they know for a fact that Drew Allar won't be. And that to me is disappointing. And I don't know why everyone else is so willing to defend him and put all the blame on almost everybody else when there's got to be higher expectations for this young man. And I hope he gets there. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole thing with me is, what has he really shown us? I mean, what? that he doesn't play well against good teams? I mean, that's when you need your quarterback the most. And he plays his worst football against good teams in big situations. And you do wonder how much of it is a confidence issue. And I agree with you. And you hear from his teammates, you hear from his coaches like, oh, Drew's always the same guy. I don't think he is. Like, do we see the same guy on the sideline? He, at one point, the camera caught him, and I kind of feel bad that it caught him like this, but like his head was down and we were only down 2 scores. It's like, dude, you should be rallying the troops. You should have that determined look on your face that I've seen so many years with a Tom Brady, with whoever, like no, like I'm gonna go and take my team back, and you didn't get any of that vibe from Drew. None of it. Like, he showed you, at least he showed me, absolutely no I have zero confidence from what I saw that he's going to be the quarterback of a team that could compete realistically for a national championship. And that's disappointing. Now, does it mean he can't develop? Of course not. He has a ton of talent. I see the talent. But I've seen a lot of guys with big arms over the years. So what? You have a big arm. So, I mean, really, it's Jay Cutler did too. I mean, and of course he worked with the different guys and everything, but like, that's not everything when you look at a quarterback. I think there's been a failure in media to evaluate what makes a good quarterback over the years. And it's funny because, like, in my lifetime, we saw Peyton Manning, who didn't have a Howard Sterling arm. We saw Tom Brady, who didn't have a tremendous arm. We've seen Drew Brees. Like, there are multiple ways he could be a good quarterback. You don't need to look like Josh Allen to be a good quarterback. And a lot of guys that look like Josh Allen don't end up being good quarterbacks. So it's just disappointing. I think he had a disappointing year. I mean, we all watched Jalen Milroe play against Michigan, and I don't think anybody would agree Jalen Milroe played well. He had almost double the passing yards, I'm saying, against Michigan that Drew Allar did. So,
how many yards did Drew Allar have against Michigan?
70.
Oh, Lord.
And he was not a threat on the ground, I could assure you, like Jalen Milroe was.
Hey, he did score a touchdown, but he also fumbled one.
This is true, just like Milroe. So I guess he is the same. But yeah, there's nothing to lean on though with Drew, like there is with a guy like Jalen Milroe. And that
game was at home too.
It was at home. Yeah, it wasn't a neutral site game with everybody in the world watching you. So it's just that he hasn't shown us much to hang our hat on, and that's very alarming. Now, am I a Perbula should start guy? No. I do think he should have played a lot more in the second half, because there was a bit of a spark there, and pretty much every time he came in, good things happened, because Ole Miss really didn't look like they wanted to deal with Bo Perbula at all. And
except for the throw backwards on the trick play.
That was not good. I will give you that. That was not good. That was also a play that we shouldn't have called, but sometimes it gets, sometimes, I mean, that's something we see a lot. When we're in trouble, we go to a trick play. That's kind of something we've seen with James Franklin's teams over the years. And they never really work. Yeah, he just lacks a swagger. He lacks a confidence. And I do think, to end on a positive note, I think if he just gets that, and maybe Andy Kotelnicki is the guy that'll give it to him, I do think he could be good. And he gets a receiver too, because receivers are an issue too. And I mean, we just killed the receivers. If you don't think we're hard on the receivers, I ripped Keandre Lambert-Smith for like 20 minutes. So, and that's just one guy. But like, since when? Like, are we not like? You have to be able to acknowledge both. You have to. And I could criticize Keandre Lambert-Smith all day. Nobody's going to complain. And no, and but we can't say anything about Drew Allar. Like, did we watch the same guy all year? I mean, come on.
The only like positive thing I can think of though is how much we're harping on him, and he ended up with 29 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Like, the bar is set high. I don't want to like not acknowledge that, but I want to say it's more of the throws he didn't elect to throw than the ones that he did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think if he played, yes, and to build on that, I think if he played better in the Michigan, Ohio State, and Ole Miss games, then yeah, I mean, I think if he played just better in those games, we'd all be feeling a lot better. And really, I think if we, let me put it this way, and this goes a little beyond Drew. If we had beaten Michigan or Ohio State and the same exact game happened in the Peach Bowl, I think everybody would be feeling a whole lot better about everybody. And that just didn't happen. So
just feels like same shit, different day.
Exactly. And it's frustrating, and I think we're just frustrated at everybody right now. And it's just unfortunate. And I do hope, and it seems like Andy Kotelnicki is this type of guy. I do hope that he can infuse some confidence in him, because I think a confident Drew Allar could look like a totally different guy than we saw this year.
Well, that's a good segue into our fan questions, because I believe we have a fan question that relates to that. Again, you can drop us fan questions at HardcorePSUFB. Even if we haven't tweeted it out yet, if you DM us on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I will save them for the next show. So you can do that if you will. Let's start with this question here from Tyler. This is Tyler from Instagram. Appreciate you, Tyler. Straight up, is Drew Allar broken? I know he didn't play with his starting left tackle, but he feels like a square peg in a round hole at this point. Convince me otherwise, please. Tyler, you're not going to like the answer. I don't know if I can convince you otherwise right now. I don't know if he's broken, because to be honest with you, I don't think it was a like something broke him, if that makes sense. I don't know if like he's really changed for better or worse since the beginning of the year. He's just been who he has been, which are good plays, but not willing to thread the ball, not willing to give the wide receiver a chance. If you watched the Michael Penix performance for Washington in the Sugar Bowl, it was a thing of beauty. Just threading the needle, giving his wide receivers a chance to make plays, evading the blitz. He did everything perfect. I'm not asking for that level of competency, but I do think like that's where you need to get to. And I don't think Drew Allar even gives his guys a chance. The square peg and a round hole thing, as far as maybe scheme, we'll have to wait and see with Andy Kotelnicki. I don't think that itself is the issue. I will say what everyone says or why everyone feels that way comes back to the confidence thing. Like, why does everything seem so difficult, Sean? Like, why does it just seem just painful to move the football? Like my fiance last night, we were watching the game, the Washington Texas game, and she was just like, it's nice to see an offense move the football on big chunks. Like, it's fun. And I'm like, yeah. And I think I tweeted this, but I'm pretty sure Washington had more big plays in the entire game against a top 4 team in Texas than Penn State had all season. Like, they are a fun team to watch offensively. Penn State hasn't been that way for quite some time. So I can't convince you. I don't think it's a square peg in a round hole from a scheme perspective. I just really think it kind of comes back to confidence. Sean, one last thing I wanted to say, I forgot to say earlier. The only physical thing I think he really needs to work on is touch. And I'm going to talk about this when we have a film room, but like that one pass to Trey Potts in the Peach Bowl is going to stick out to me forever, where he rifled it at Trey Potts for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I'm like, damn, Drew, like, calm down. Like, just those are the ones that would make me go, well, why'd you throw it that hard at him? You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing I do think touch would come a long way. But I can't convince you right now, Tyler, but I do think it kind of comes back to confidence.
Yeah, and there are other things like he tends to drift in the pocket a little bit into pressure. If he's going through his progressions, sometimes he does that. I don't think he throws with anticipation really well. Unfortunately, those are things that are tough to coach. It's tough to coach a guy for anticipation. And it's common enough when you see a big arm quarterback because they don't necessarily have to throw with anticipation. A guy like Michael Penix does, because Michael Penix doesn't have a huge arm. Neither does Tua Tagovailoa. You have to throw with anticipation and hit your guys out before they're even out of their break. The ball's got to be there. Is he broken? Little bit. Does that mean he can't be fixed? No. I mean, if you've ever played with a paper airplane when you were small, you could fix those. If you ever, yeah, I mean, you could glue them back together. So yeah, it could be fixed. But I just think his confidence is shaken right now, and it's got to be fixed. And I hope we got a guy that could do that. And his position coaching situation is a little odd, I would say. It sounds like Danny O'Brien will essentially be doing it, but James Franklin and Andy Kotelnicki will also be involved. So I don't really know how that's going to work, and I think we got to just hope for the best.
All right, Sean, next question is from Lucas Powers, longtime listener. What do we think Andy Kotelnicki, offensive coordinator, is going to think about the quarterback situation? My gut tells me he'd rather build the offense around a dual threat guy like Bo Prabula. Sean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think he's worked with both styles before. He's worked with the drop back passer. He's worked with the more mobile quarterback. So he's worked with both styles. At Kansas, it was more dual threat. So ideally, and I think James Franklin is this way too, at his core. They both like dual threat quarterbacks. And in a way, I mean, I think they made Drew into somewhat of a dual threat. Like, he's not afraid to tuck it and run. But he's not a natural runner, whereas Bo clearly is. I just don't know if he's a natural passer. So overall, I think he's going to recruit guys like Bo, but he's going to work with what he's got right now.
I think Andy Kotelnicki and James Franklin are a match made in heaven from like what they would want in a perfect world. Because I think you gotta. I mean, look at the quarterbacks in the college football playoff this year. J.J. McCarthy, really good with his legs. Milroy, probably one of the best running quarterbacks I've ever seen as far as just true speed. I mean, holy crap, is he fast. Quinn Ewers, ability to move in the pocket and extend plays and make plays with his feet. Michael Penix Jr., your 2-point conversion wasn't good, but you get my point. They all had the ability. Like, you think you got to have some wiggle. I think Drew Allar is probably in this day and age like the bottom of what you need, but he's still enough. But you got to have at least the mobility of Drew Allar. Like, I don't think you can get away with a true 100% pocket passer only. You've got to have some wiggle. Just because defenses are so good nowadays, you've got to be able to make a play on and stress the defense with your legs at least a little bit. I don't think that's even a debate anymore. But I retweeted something from Stat of War at Stat of War on Twitter, and they showed that the Kansas quarterback had one of the longest yards per attempt, basically, of anybody in the country. I think it was like 11 yards. So Kansas quarterback not afraid to take some shots, and hopefully that's instilled in the Drew Allar as well. All right, next question here is from Devin, longtime listener of the show. Devin says, do you think Penn State has a true difference maker at any offensive position groups right now? And if not, are you concerned about this team's ceiling in 2024? I see some good pieces, but I'm really concerned about where we go with this group, even with an offseason to get better. Sean?
I guess it depends on your definition of difference maker. I think Tyler Warren's a hell of a tight end. I think he might be the bright spot from the Peach Bowl on offense because he played an awesome game. Is he Brock Bowers, though? No. And it's harder to be a difference maker at tight end. We've only had a couple of them. It's just a tougher position, just the nature of it, and what, unless you're a freak like a Kyle Pitts a couple of years ago or a Brock Bowers, it's harder to be that difference maker. I think Nick Singleton has ability. I think we saw a little bit of the Nick Singleton we all knew in 2022. I would probably put Singleton and his lack of success early more on Mike Yurcich than almost anybody else, and just not running the plays that he's best at and putting him in positions to succeed. So I would say maybe Singleton, and maybe Warren, but anybody bona fide? No, I don't think so. But I do see pieces that we could build on, and I do see pieces that could be difference makers next season.
Yeah, I think running backs I would feel good about those guys. And I feel really good about the tight end position. Khalil Jenkins played a lot in the Peach Bowl. I'm excited for what he can do. I think Rapplier is going to be something special. Still in the verdict's out on Schlaffer, but then Luke Reynolds, like, he's at the Under Armour Bowl right now. I don't know how they're going to keep Luke Reynolds off the field, to be honest with you. I just don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to do because Warren's back and you got all those other guys. I don't know how Luke Reynolds stays off the field. So,
well, a guy like him might be in that freak category I was talking about.
Right. And so I would say feel really good about the tight ends and running backs, if that makes you feel any better, Devin. But what does that say that we're not talking about a 5-star quarterback who is going to be a second-year starter?
Didn't even come up.
Yeah.
I already got that.
Got that one. All right. So this one's from Bradley. Bradley is a little bit of a loose cannon on the Twitter sphere sometimes, but that's all right. So we all can be. This is the only sport that has this mentality, so I think it should be asked. Why should fans be optimistic about 2024? The future starters that we trotted out got blasted by Ole Miss, and it's January, and we still haven't got any transfers at the wide receiver position, among others. Well, Julian Fleming came in before this question was asked, but to his point, we haven't got anything additionally besides that. And probably won't get that much more before May at this point. Maybe they pick up somebody before then, but it's hard to imagine they pick up more than maybe one or two more before May at this juncture. So, Sean, let me ask you, why should fans be optimistic for 2024?
You shouldn't. We're going 5-7. Nah. I mean, look, I get everybody's bummed out. I'm bummed out. I don't think this is the season really any of us wanted. I mean, we failed to meet our goals this year, and it's always disappointing when that happens. I feel a little similar to how I did after the 2021 season. Now, this was a better team, no question about it, than the 2021 team, but we had gotten waxed by Arkansas, and we were 7-6, and we really didn't know much of anything about the team coming in. We knew Sean Clifford was back, and I think a lot of the fans were disappointed when he came back. And a bunch of freshmen that nobody really knew. And that team ended up exceeding expectations and went to the Rose Bowl and beat a really good Utah team. So what I'm saying is it's hard to say right now that we're just going to suck next year, because I don't necessarily believe that. And let me give you some reasons why. I think the offensive coordinator is legit. I think Andy Kotelnicki's a really good coach, and he's going to improve this offense. How much? I don't know. I think a lot of that depends on Drew's progression, and a lot of it depends on the wide receivers. And replacing a guy like Olu Fashanu, you don't really replace him. You just hope that the next guy could be good. You'd be able to fill in there at that really important position. On defense, I think you're still going to have a really good defense next year. It's not going to be as good as this year's. And that's okay, because you hope that the offense will take a step and be better. And I still think the defense has a chance to be really good. I think Tom Allen's a good coach. The defensive ends, Denai Dennis Sutton, I think has a chance to be an All-American next season. I think Abdul Carter and a system like Tom Allen's could really flourish. I think Kobe King has a chance to take another step. I think it's going to come down to how those corners progress. You certainly hope that they play better than they did on Saturday. I think they will. But I think you're going to see a bit of a drop-off in the secondary. And frankly, we're probably all a little spoiled by the last couple of years in the secondary. So I think we're going to be good. I don't know how good yet, though. I want to see what else we do in the portal, and Julian Fleming's really going to help, I think. So we're going to be good. Just don't know how good.
That game against West Virginia at West Virginia, there was rumors that it might have was going to be taken off the schedule. That hasn't happened yet. If that game does happen, it's a potential first ranked opponent there to start the year.
I hadn't seen that it might get taken off.
No, there was just a rumor going around.
I hope we play.
We already kind of talked about this, so I'm not going to go into this one. I don't need to get fired up again. Sean, I don't want to necessarily say I feel better after this episode today.
I kind of feel the same.
Yeah. Appreciate everyone being here. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and for listening all year long. We had really good numbers in 2023, so thank you so much for that. Thanks to Mercury for tagging us along. Excited for 2024. Gonna have a lot of great things coming your way. Hopefully merch will be out soon. But no, we had a really good year. Didn't achieve all of our goals, but from a strictly podcast downloading goal, we achieved our goal. So we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll be hoping to keep it up in 2024. We'll have the Hardys coming up probably not this Monday or this week, but the next week. But we'll get out a poll for you guys soon. But thank you guys so much for a great year. The Hardys will kind of wrap up the year, so I don't want to say the year's over yet. But if you're feeling down, just focus on Julian Fleming and Devon Ellis. A little positivity in your week. So thank you guys so much for listening.
Cory's always optimistic, and yes, thank you. This
is our fun. This is what we do for fun. Got to find a way to keep it fun.
Absolutely. And yeah, so there was good news today, which is always nice. Yeah, Yeah, thank you again. I second everything Cory said. Thank you again for listening. Well, Penn State failed to meet expectations. We met ours, at least from a podcasting perspective. So, and that's all thanks to you guys. And without you guys, we are not at Mercury. We are not, that we're just two guys talking then. So very thankful for you. And I think 2024 is going to be a great year for us. And hopefully a great year for Penn State football. Won't be a great year for commercials because it's also a presidential election season. So get ready for that. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. So yeah, I think we're gonna have a great year together. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, you've been listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. Until next time, see everybody.